We are live, ladies and gentlemen, halfway into this global transmission. Bruce Fein, who is a constitutional lawyer, former general counsel at the Federal Communications Commission, former advisor in the campaign, the head of his foreign affairs for Ron Paul, is here in studio with us. And he's got so much to get into about what's really happening in Washington, what he thinks Trump needs to do, the way things really work there, the fact that Trump's only gotten people in one deep at the federal agencies, and what he thinks is really unfolding. So what I'm going to let you do here, sir, is we're going to put the camera on you, at least 10 minutes, or I'll never shut up, and just get into some of those great points we talked about at breakfast yesterday, because this is really the inside scoop on what's going on. You're like 100 and something yards away from the Capitol at your offices with what's really happening in D.C. and the battle for this republic. Here it is, the day the Alamo fell, on Alamo Day here in Texas, as we're covering all this. And then we will open the phones up for the second half of the next hour for you and get into some other news. But boy, they are after Trump on every front. They're saying they didn't wiretap him, but they did. There's no Russian evidence, but it doesn't matter. Certainly the power structure is mad at Donald Trump. But talking to you, you're saying that, look, he's a businessman, but he doesn't know how Washington works. You've got some really good advice for him. So I'd say this is a insider, a good insider. It's the guy that got rid of the fairness doctrine, you name it. The reason we even have free speech and talk radio today, you're here trying to actually communicate with the president today and his people so that he understands what you've seen as an observer, some of the mistakes he's made.
Yeah, I don't want to call mistakes. I just want to focus on going forward. I think that's the best thing. And some of these observations are made based upon my experience during the transition from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan in 1980. Personnel is policy. And as you pointed out, Alex, it's critical that you have your team in. That's the way that politics works. You have elections, new people with new ideas come in. At present, we have really only a handful of Trump-appointed officials running key agencies at the Department of Defense, Department of State, at the Justice Department. The others are either vacant or they're Obama holdovers. And you can't have a changing ship of state with only a few hands when you're running a $4.3 trillion enterprise. It's got over 2 million federal employees, more than 2 million federal contractors, with a handful. There's too much going on in order to take control of the policy. And I think that's why there's been so many distractions. So the first thing I would recommend that the president consider is filling many of the positions at the second and third tier levels, the Department of Justice, which is critical. Judge Napolitano, I would suggest, would make a splendid deputy attorney general. Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University, head office of legal counsel. Richard Epstein, a University of Chicago professor, very much devoted to property rights. Solicitor General Tom Campbell, former Republican congressman. Associate Attorney General. These are the kinds of names that have to be gotten in place very quickly. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting firefights every single day because you're going to be dealing with people who are not yours. They're not loyal to you. They're holdovers, and they don't have any incentive for your administration to succeed.
Well, surely Trump knows this, so why hasn't he been able to? I mean, they admit that the Justice Department, the State Department are in open rebellion. So, I mean, what would you do?
I'd say get names and send them to Congress. It's not because Congress there aren't even names to consider for hearings. And I believe, and it's really based more on circumstantial evidence than otherwise. Alex, it takes, having been involved in this from Carter to Reagan, you have to have a wide circle of people who have been in government, who know how it works in order to get a list of names.
Sure, people you trust that can then bring in teams.
They can bring in teams, and they need to know how government works. It doesn't work like business. In government, oftentimes 2 + 2 is 5, or it's 3. And so you need people with different backgrounds and different expertise than those who can bring in profits in business. And that means that people, I mean, I've been in Washington almost 50 years, deal with circles of people. You build up names, people you trust, their judgment. And from those lists, you then compile, all right, we think these are the slots that could be filled. And I'm not certain that President Trump's, his initial inner circle has that circle.
Sure,
of
Ron Paul, who I trust, doesn't trust a lot of people, and he trusts you to be the head of his foreign policy advisor for several campaigns. How'd you meet Ron Paul? How did that trust build up?
Well, I met him as a member of Congress, and he used to have roundtables at lunchtime where he'd have his small group of what you would call his band of brothers who believed in small government and having presidents be president of the United States like President Trump rather than president of the world, and say if you can march them in, you can march them out to get out of wars. And I knew Ron by communicating with right on Capitol Hill. My offices are within 5 minutes of walking distance. So, and then you learn and you meet their staffs, and that's the kind of relationship you build up. But you actually have to physically be there. It's not developing a relationship by email. It's just sitting down and seeing people face to face, get a sense of their judgment. And that's the kind of personal experience that you need in order to tap in to the circles of those who know how to turn the ship of state around. It's complicated. It's not easy. You can't just press.
Sure. Where would you say we are right now as a republic in world history?
I think that we are no longer a republic, Alex. I think that we have so much endowed the executive branch with limitless power. We resemble far more the monarchy of King George III than the democracy of George Washington. I mean, the president goes to war on his own, he spies on his own, he spends money on his own, he claims that he can do things.
Is that why the left is so freaked out? Because they built this political god with all this power, and now the guy that wants to devolve the power is in that seat. Yeah,
because the left had no difficulty at all in accepting all the expansion under President Obama. When he did it, he had no authority to go into Libya. They just turned they blinded themselves to their eyes. When Obama said, okay, there's war against ISIS, I don't need congressional authority, even when Congress turned him down in 2013, the liberals said nothing. When he said he wanted to do a treaty with Iran, that he was going to call an executive order and violate the treaty clause, the Democrats said, well, that's fine. You don't need to actually do a treaty anymore like we did with the UN. You can view treaties as unfortunate or not. And moreover, Alex, President Obama and his Secretary of State, John Kerry, testified for Congress that the reason why the Iran deal wasn't going to be a treaty, because he said it's too hard to get treaties ratified. So he didn't want to do them anymore. He said that he was in favor of a treaty concerning disabilities, and therefore he couldn't get it ratified, and that was the heck with it. I mean, that's basically an insurrection against the Constitution. You don't do it because you can't win? You don't run elections because you can't win? You don't do legislation because you can't win? So in the arc, if you want to call a history having an arc as opposed to linear progressions, we are back to where we started from. We have come full circle from being a liberty-centered universe to a government-centered universe. And this is what we need to end. I think that was what the American people were saying in 2016.
And in his inaugural, he said he wants to do that. He's clearly trying to do it. And you see the stock market up, small businesses up. But as you said, the Republican Party's blocking him, the establishment's blocking him. What would you do then if you were President Trump right now?
Said, got to go with the personnel first, because you can't do things without real people who make those decisions. And
okay, then why hasn't he done that?
Well, I can't get into his head. I think that he seems to me to be distracted on things that are very minor compared to the urgency of getting his people in place and making these decisions. And I don't, but generally speaking, Alex, I don't find it constructive to find fault finding in the past, try to move forward. Everybody stumbles. That's part of the game. To err is human, to forgive is divine. But going forward, there are only so many stumbles. Focus on it. It's not like, it's not rocket science. You need your people who are
No, I get it. But Trump actually listens to people he thinks are giving real counsel.
Yeah.
What would you do next then if you were in Trump's position?
Hey, go out and find and make these nominations to the second tier. I mean, you want to get out of these what I think are ill-conceived wars. I mean, someone even who is outside the mainstream of the Republicans in the Congress, Walter Jones, who's on armed services.
He'd be great.
He would be fabulous as Deputy Secretary of State. And
I've said that. He's super moral.
And he absolutely is. And Alex, he is the only one who's written letters of condolence to every single family who's had a soldier die since 9/11. Every single one.
He should be part of Trump's operation.
And he is the only one. And I go to Congress and their office space. He's the only one outside of his office. He's got pictures of everyone in his district who died, who gave that less full measure of devotion to the United States. And Nancy Pelosi wanted to have him take those pictures down. And I helped him say no. But that would be a fabulous move. He said, okay, I am president of the United States. And Walter would bring back our troops to defend our sea lanes, our land borders, our airspace, our cyberspace. They spend their salaries in the United States, not elsewhere. And people forget that we, at one time, had more influence abroad when we were 13 states without really any military-industrial complex after we won the Revolutionary War, because we set the example of we the people. And all the monarchs and tyrants in Europe and Asia.
They said, how do we compete with the American system?
Absolutely. And they were fearful that happened in France, that their people would revolt. And we didn't need a single bullet to do that. We just needed the example and practice it here. And that's what we need to get back to doing. And we understand that we can't change Iraqis into Canadians by dropping bombs on them. It's not going to happen. It's like thinking you can repeal Newton's laws of motion. So I
want to get more into the Washington insider, gives Trump his warning and analysis. But just looking at the Democrats themselves, Pelosi thinks that Bush is still in office. In the same press conference, Maxine Waters thinks that Putin, with Trump support, has invaded, quote, Korea, not North or South, just Korea. I mean, I watch him and I think, oh, well, that was just one press conference. I watch another. They look like they couldn't manage a cash register at 7-Eleven. So I'm really concerned about the Republicans are bad as well, but they seem more cunning. The Democrats, I don't understand why they seem so mentally deranged.
Well, this is, Alex, my view is let them be there. I mean, I think that they are trying to distract themselves from the reasons why Hillary Clinton lost the presidency. And in my mind, fine, go ahead and blind yourself to what everybody could see about the terrible nature of the policies that she was promoting and the nature of her candidacy itself. It comes back, the Democrats didn't win. They don't control the agenda. But we are not going to control the agenda unless we have our people confirmed. And we keep.
How much danger do you think Trump's in from them trying to impeach him? Because they admit that's what they want to do. Obama's moving in down the street, saying he wants to overthrow him, but then admits he's wiretapping him, but then says he isn't.
I don't think that he's in danger if he just moves forward with his policy. And I don't understand why, in my lifetime, when George W. Bush won, Alex, in 2002, that was a far more precarious election than Donald Trump's, because it went into court, highly disputed.
Sure.
There was division. And the president would move forward. The nation accepted. All right, he was elected. We move on. No one thinks that the first term of W was illegitimate. He had 2 terms. We moved on. We evaluated what he did. I think that President Trump should just say, and I think the American people are willing to say, you got elected, fair and square, move on with your policies. Put your people in, do what you said.
Well, his approval rating is going up the more they flip out. So maybe I shouldn't be so concerned, just let them keep spinning around?
Listen, public opinion can be very fickle. I remember in my lifetime, you probably did too, Alex, when George H.W. Bush came back after we destroyed Saddam's forces in Kuwait, he was at 91%.
And he dropped down to 40 quick.
Yeah, overnight. Don't be preoccupied with the poll ratings from day to day. Just push forward on the policies. That was what the American people are going to vote on. Did you end the wars? Did you cut back government? Did you eliminate these agencies like education department?
Well, Trump knows that, and Bannon, I know you've had mixed feelings on. I mean, he really wants to break the back of collectivism, actually make poor people rich, actually make the globalists not consolidate wealth, but share it through a free market. I think that they can do that.
They can. I mean, there's nothing that inhibits them now any less than at the time that the inauguration happened.
Why are the Democrats fighting so hard then? And Republican leadership?
We have a political culture that's been entrenched for a century. They don't want the government to slim down. Their view is that the United States is about making government great rather than the people having an opportunity to develop their faculties and pursue their ambitions. So it's a threat to them when you say, oh, you mean I'm not going to be part of a $4.3 trillion government agency anymore? It's going to come back. Then their prestige, their status, their financial opportunities become compromised.
They don't have a sense of the connected greatness of humanity.
Well, I don't think
it's all part of their own little thing.
Yes, I think,
which is transitory and fails. Only empowering humanity is what goes on.
Well, I think where the deficiency is on both sides, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, is failing to recognize that we were unique as a nation in understanding that our legacy, our greatness comes from the opportunity we want to give all of our individuals here to develop their faculties, to pursue their ambition.
We're not building pyramids, as you love to say, to the elites. Let's talk about that, because, look, if people love North Korea or Venezuela or whatever in socialized states or communist states, go there. I mean, couldn't it be, hey, America's about freewheeling, open society. Everybody wanted to come here because this is actually what builds pyramids for humanity, not for the elites.
Exactly right. They don't have an immigration problem in China, in Russia, North Korea. People aren't immigrating to North Korea. And that's a testament to, but we're so far from what we used to be, Alex.
We're a shadow of ourselves. I mean, you give me a real assessment of Trump. I mean, I think he means well. That's why I admire him. I mean, he's really trying.
I think we need to focus less on fault finding. We need to get the job done. You know, this is...
I agree, but as a man, I'm asking you your real opinion of Donald Trump.
The fact was, he was willing to say things that no one else was willing to say. And I think that his ambition, as stated, to recognize he's president of the United States, not of the world, that he's here to represent the people of the United States.
He's saying everything you've been saying forever.
Yeah, I've been saying, not only me, George Washington was saying it. This happened for 200 years, and it took Donald Trump, after it's been in hiatus for like a century, hey, this really is what the United States is. Yeah,
you got elected to represent us, so that's how it works.
Yeah, that's how.
It's like a marriage. You're like, hey, you're married to me, not England. Or
I call this if you're in government, and I was there, you're a temporary steward of the liberties of the people. They still are your rulers. And that's why I say the highest office in the land is not the Oval Office. It's not the Speaker of the House or the Speaker of the Senate. It's you as citizen of the United States. You are the highest
That's right.
office.
We have to step into that office.
Yes, and because we the people are sovereign, not the government. We the people are sovereign. And you know what Thomas Paine described a patriot at the time of the Revolution? A patriot saves his country from his government. That's what it means to be citizen of the United States.
All right, Bruce Fein, former chief counsel of the Federal Communications Commission. They're with us on the other side. All right, Bruce Fein's with us 30 minutes to the next hour. Then I'm going to open the phones up, and then Owen Schroyer's hosting the fourth hour. We have Chris Ruddy, who met with the president over the weekend in Mar-a-Lago, talking about just how angry he is. Head of Newsmax, CEO of Newsmax, talking about how angry he is that Sessions recused himself. I want to get into getting rid of agency, something you've talked about. You've talked a lot about. We all know Congress is a low approval rating. They pass the buck. They give it to the bureaucracy or the president. You're saying have the president go right to them and demand, they do something and make them take action. Yeah. I understand the optics. He wants to take action with what he can right up front. But as you said, a new president comes in, that gets wiped away. Needs to be statutorily or, in the law changed. But specifically, just looking at the overall atmosphere, all these Democratic attacks and Republican attacks on Trump wanting to keep their power, is that going anywhere?
I don't think it's going anywhere at all. I don't think that the American people are rallying behind the Democrats and giving them fabulous approval ratings and, having huge demonstrations, in favor of what the Democrats want.
So we're seeing spoiled entitlement.
Absolutely. It's grown up for so many years, Alex. I've been there for 50 years, and every single year the government got bigger and bigger. Maybe it borrowed the money rather than raised it by revenue. That never got smaller, and it always, I think, lost sight of the fact that as the United States, our greatness is, it's not pyramids. It's giving everyone an opportunity to develop their faculties.
It's not letting crony capitalist monopolies take over.
Yeah, not letting the big banks, not letting the military-industrial complex, and going back to the fundamental principle. It's great. We succeed when everybody gets to chart their own destiny, captain of their fate. You don't get to tell me how I live my life. I don't tell you.
That creates the secret sauce, of the real diversity.
Oh, yeah, the diversity and the genius. We need the genius of people building better mousetraps, not working for the CIA or the NSA or the military trying to kill people. That's the genius. That's what made us into a fabulous nation within 100
Exactly.
years.
If we have all the fabulous inventions and the big, beautiful cities and technology, everyone's going to follow us regardless.
Absolutely.
Soft power.
Yeah, we wouldn't need to have, in fact, we would attract so much brains out of the rest of the world. They wouldn't have.
You know, Eisenhower criticized the military-industrial complex as he presided over its takeover, but they had the whiz kid functions and all about the people. That all kind of stalled out.
It did. I mean, the understanding that the military-industrial complex, it was almost unique to President Heiser because he had been there. He knew about it, and no one could criticize him because he was there at D-Day. You know, you're not going to criticize him. Other presidents, they got taken over, and you bring in all these whiz kids, and they drive us into Vietnam and these useless wars that accomplish nothing other than cause us to go bankrupt and make us less safe instead of recognize we need invincible self-defense here at home. No one's going to destroy
to protect all the incredible brain trust in what we've built.
Yeah.
And then everyone's going to be begging to sell us their raw materials and begging to be part of it.
Yeah, and they will come over in hordes because that's the opportunity. That's what happened in the 1800s. We will get the best and the brightest from all over the world.
But notice globalism wants us to be its military arm, take the blame. Yeah. Then the UN and the globalists become the groups that hand out the technology. So they become America when they're the opposite of it.
Yeah, and they want us to defend the whole world. Well, we have an obligation to go everywhere. No, we have an obligation to the American people because we are the
ones. And they say
Trump's
anti-NATO just because he says pay part of it.
Yeah, which in my judgment, that's a ridiculous argument to make. And anyway, in my view, NATO needs to defend itself. You know, we have no obligation to defend them. We know that they're not there in our best interest. They're there in their best interest. They take advantage of us.
And the EU is a criminal group. Well, let's come back in 70 seconds, talk about agencies to get rid of, and we've got the British minister. We've got that clip right here with the EU tyranny. It's a fact. And you know it's true. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. Bruce Feins, our guest, former foreign affairs advisor to Ron Paul presidential campaign, former counsel, lead counsel of the Federal Communications Commission, helping to create talk radio by getting rid of that regulation. As you pointed out at breakfast the other day, that was all just the interpretation of it. It wasn't even there. It was always just a bluff.
Fairness doctrine, Alex, originated by a Democratic-controlled Federal Communications Commission in the late 1940s. It wasn't a statutory requirement, but over the years, by the time I became general counsel, it was accepted or wrongly that, well, it was a mandate by Congress. And like this, no, Congress has never ratified it. It acknowledged it existed. And that is what caused me then to initiate the process that led to the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine. But it shows how expectations can crystallize wrongly into convictions because it happens to favor certain kinds of people. And that's a reason why you need to get your own people in place who will take second and third looks at this. Is this really required? My view is if you probably went to other agencies, there are probably dozens similar to the Fairness Doctrine that are lying around under the misapprehension that they're required by Congress.
Well, here's what we know. Biggest government the world's ever seen. Keeps growing and growing and growing like a cancer, has declared the people the enemy. It's so arrogant. We've got to start cutting agencies. What would you do there if you were Trump?
Well, one of the things that especially fits into the current controversies, I don't see any reason why we even need a CIA. And a Central Intelligence Agency can be abolished. It was created in 1947. It makes mistakes all the time. Its first covert action was to interfere with a foreign election in Italy, of all places, like where the Italy went otherwise. It's not, it thought Gorbachev was going to fall after he couldn't possibly be a reformer. I don't see any reason. We just, the public domain information is good enough for anybody with any really sense to project what's going to happen in the future. We need battlefield intelligence, but the military can do that. So that's one thing that could be useful. Then he ought to go down the agenda. We don't need an education department. We survived well and prospered without one for 200 years.
We do not need centralized education teaching us 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, and moreover, and even believing that microaggressions or something is part of the educational process. But putting that aside, the education department can go. Commerce Department can go. Labor Department can go. The Department of Energy, except its nuclear weapons, need to be transferred over to the military. All these agencies go. We're saving tens of billions of dollars. Really, and I think even more important, Alex, is failing to recognize what the standard ought to be for creating an agency, for creating a law. Every time you have a law, you're compromising the liberties of the American people by saying you can't do this anymore, we need more of your tax money. And we need to have a standard that says we don't create agencies, we don't enact laws unless it's very critical to protecting American people from domestic or external aggression.
Exactly. They're only there to serve the people and to the continuity of the overall sovereignty of the nation. They're not just there to tax and destroy and control people.
And build bridges to nowhere. I mean, that's simply wrong. And I come back. What it means to be an American is that you get to chart your own destiny. You get to decide what life you want. Other people don't get you, tell you to do it. And it's the kind of spirit, it's a variation of Huey Long. Every man or woman's a king and queen, but no one wears a crown. That's what America is about. It's not about building legacies and building pyramids and monuments and this and that. It's the freedom and liberties of the American people to say, I lived a life that I was able to chart, and I decided in my way, I made my errors. Government, get out of the way other than making sure that aggression doesn't destroy me.
We're going to go to break and come back. I want to ask you, Bruce Fein, getting at all the points you were making at breakfast the other morning about just the way government works, the different things that are happening, the different angles, and just your message to Trump and the American people in general about how we can win this fight against the collectivist in this key chapter. And I also want to ask you, where does it go if Trump fails? Yeah. Because I look at the opposition and they are just addled. They are very, very bizarre people. Christopher Ruddy, the head of Newsmax, who I guess had dinner, spent some time with the president. He's been a member of Mar-a-Lago for 20 years, President's Club. He's in the news saying he met with the president. He is so mad about the wiretaps because they told him you're being wiretapped. Congress said nothing was found on the wiretaps. And the media goes, Trump's insane. There were no wiretaps. Thousands of news articles admitting the illegal wiretaps. Obama finds nothing. Trump says that's illegal. So they say there are no wiretaps. It shows the systemic deception. Even George W. Bush's former Attorney General says, no, there's wiretaps. They got CIA people and they got Congress saying, of course there's wiretaps. We reviewed them. So again, I look at the Democrats. I used to hate Republicans and Democrats, and I still do, but the Democrats themselves are just such liars. Bruce Fein, I mean, can you comment on that controversy and just where you see it going? Because it's so crazy to admit they're wiretapping, but then say they're not wiretapping.
Well, I worked on the Ed Snowden issue, and the fact is, to say that we don't intercept conversations and communications.
I forgot about that. Have you done work with Snowden?
Yeah, I represented his father and was.
I forget all the great. I mean, you're such a bigwig. You've done so much stuff. Tell folks about that.
Yeah. So I mean, the revelations are that the NSA, they intercept virtually everything. You know, they collect everything. They have so much information they can't even sort through it. And they don't make exceptions. I mean, I spoke to somebody. They even intercept conversations that members of Congress have in their own offices. They intercept communications that judges have and lawyers have. It's indiscriminate, vacuum cleans everything. And they never disputed that what Snowden revealed wasn't accurate. They just said, well, but he wasn't the one person who ought to disclose it. Well, if it's true, it's true. And remember, you know, about the denials here. It was March of 2015, I believe, when then the Director of National Intelligence was asked under oath in an open Senate hearing whether the agency was collecting data on millions of Americans. James Clapper was his name.
He said no.
Yeah. And he said no, you know, because he's collecting data on hundreds of, in fact, every American citizen. He says no. And he was told in advance, I know, by Senator Ron Wyden that to expect the question. It wasn't an ambuscade. So
and he wasn't a mistake. So the same guy now says no wiretapping of Trump, even though they admit they have the communiques.
I wouldn't believe anything the NSA said.
No, I get that, but why do they lie when they know they're going to get caught? It's like saying you're not wearing a blue jacket. Well, you are wearing one.
I can't get in their heads. It's a way to, I suppose, to distract attention, but I just keep coming back. I think, Alex, the American people, they deserve better than this. They deserve getting their country back. They deserve them being in the catbird seat.
Well, who believes Trump is on the Russian control? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I keep coming back. The policies are the United States making the American people empowered, They control their life. They have fair opportunities. They shouldn't be taxed to support all these government boondoggles that are totally extraneous to what it means to be American and invincible self-defense. And I think that, you're raising these issues, Alex, and they're good issues, but they're largely distractions from the larger issue of whether we're going to survive as a republic. We are about ready to hit the Titanic.
Let's talk about hitting the Titanic, the real numbers, the real facts. What would have happened if Hillary got in? That's a Titanic.
Yeah, it would have been Titanic. We'd probably already be at war with Russia and China. Our 20 trillion deficit would probably be at like 22 or 23 or 24
And again, why would the elites want that? Because she admitted she wanted war. What the hell is that? But it'd be okay because she's a woman, though.
Well, and a Democrat. I mean, Obama did war. Obama came in and he ended with more.
So a Democrat blows the earth up, it's still liberal.
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't something that they opposed. There was not a single person. I wrote so many articles saying Hillary is the war president, and this is ever since she's been in Washington. She's never opposed any war ever. Even though her specialty is, say, turning children into orphans and wives into widows, nobody ever said anything about it. One of her closest, intellectual mentors.
I saw he died.
He died. Yeah, that's right. Sound like Julius Caesar.
I'm really good at killing people.
And one of her soulmates was Madeleine Albright, who, when she's serving under Clinton, was asked, well, what do you think about the 500,000 Iraqi children who
good price to
killed?
pay.
Yeah, she says, well, it was worth it. She didn't shed a tear. I mean,
they get off on that.
Yeah, and no one says anything. 500 Iraqi children under 5, they were guilty of what?
500,000.
Yeah, 500,000. So that's what I think. That's what we had been in, and unfortunately, if Hillary in the White House, you wouldn't hear a peep out of the New York Times, Washington Post. Silence.
The thing about Albright and all them is they never got their hands dirty. We were covering Bilderberg in like 2008 when Obama and Hillary were inside of it in Chantilly, and the media, remember, for a day couldn't find where they were at. We were there. Media wouldn't cover it. She drove in a convertible, looked at like 100 of us protesting, freaked out, panicked, drove in and drove out, panicked, and that was in the newspaper. Yeah. That she just saw 100 people standing there and got so scared. She loves 500,000 dead kids, brags about it, kind of gets sexually excited. With Leslie Stahl talking about dead kids because he's powerful now. It's like the Prince of Darkness, Richard Pearl, has been reported on. Well, at cocktail parties, will walk up to good-looking women and goes, I kill a lot of people. And the women go, man, you're really creepy. Like, they don't get, women aren't into that. Yeah. And it's just like these people. But Pearl couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag, but he calls himself the Prince of Darkness. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you want to comment on that?
Well, it's unfortunate, but I do think that women are so preoccupied with just saying, okay, we can be equal. They don't ask, well, what do you, if you
they think being equal is being a warmonger.
Yeah, that they can be equal in being war and killing people and wasting money. Well, I don't view that as being great. I don't view that as vindication.
And we hear this liberal thing, not bashing women, that women are going to stop war. In history, women that are in charge are more wars.
Yeah. Right. Well, I don't know. If you look at history, you're exactly right, Alex, that Catherine the Great was not renowned as a Catherine who was a peacemaker in Russia. Leaders often.
Queen Elizabeth, same deal.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth, the Spanish.
They always want to show the guys they're even more vicious than everybody.
Yeah, in some sense, they have to prove themselves. Cleopatra was there with Antony at the Battle of Actium,
starting those wars.
so
writing checks they can't cash.
Yes, and we need to remember as well, in terms of knowing the Titanic, right now, Alex, we're carrying a $20 trillion national debt that is at about a 1% historically unusually low interest rate. If it went back to historical averages like 3.5% on government securities, we would spend the entire budget on paying interest. We'd have no money for anything else. That's just going back to historical
averages. Let's talk about the Titanic, the facts of numbers. Then what are the Democrats and Republicans still accelerating these budgets? What are they thinking?
They're just pushing the day of the reckoning off.
So they're in denial.
They are in denial. And Alex, that's the way the Roman Empire fell.
So it did.
Pushed off and off. So it took a while. Finally, Alaric the Great sacked Rome in 410. But it took a while. And everyone said, sleep, be merry. Tomorrow somebody else can die, but I won't be around, so I won't care. That is how irresponsible this is. And that's the only reason why you could have people with complacency burden posterity with $20 trillion in national debt and not bat an eye. George Washington said in his farewell address. It is totally irresponsible and reprehensible for us not to pay back every single dollar that we borrowed so that posterity doesn't have to pay for our luxuries and convenience. That was 227 years ago. Where's that voice? No one cares at all. Well, somebody else can pay it back.
Well, I don't overuse this. It's just that I've been watching press conferences with the Democrats, and I mean, there's something wrong. Like they've had strokes or something. But I guess they're just so shell-shocked by losing their power that they just act even more bizarre, like acting out like toddlers where they don't know. They think islands are floating. I mean, it's have you seen this?
No, I've not seen floating islands out there.
Yeah, like the Democrat from Atlanta thinks islands float. And you didn't see Pelosi think that Pelosi thinks that Bush is still in office, and Maxine Waters thinks that he invaded
Korea.
I mean, I'm telling you, man. You watch these press conferences.
Well, I
mean, it's like watching a 5-year-old pretend they're an astronaut or something.
Yeah, but I do think, Alex, by giving them too much attention, we overestimate, I think their attraction. I don't see them having any game plan to recover.
So you think MSM just puts out huge lies to just try to start a fight? Like they put out outrageous stuff just to get us in an argument to make themselves pertinent?
I think that's correct.
Irrelevant.
And don't buy into that. Just ignore it and move on with your policies. Why are you trying to suggest that they're more powerful than the end?
So you think it's true Trump responds too much to their attacks? He thinks he's beating them in those attacks. I mean, I think there's something to that, but I get also just ignoring them and moving forward.
You can win the war and lose. I mean, win the battle and lose the war.
A Pyrrhic victory?
Yeah, because if he's not focused, I say, on real personnel, those energies should be searching for people to get in the government agencies. That'll turn things around. He's still distracted in his attention. He's got to have a sense of priorities. Get out of the war.
And also, you think he's got his new immigration order. I mean, you think you should get that through law, not just an order.
Yeah, I think that the best way to do that procedurally, if he wants it to stick, have it proposed as a bill. One of the primary functions of Congress is to pass immigration statutes. Indeed, in 2015, Congress did pass a statute that said, people who visited recently from Europe into Iraq and Syria, we need to have them come in and get vetted. We shouldn't have them visa-free. Congress enacted the statute, and the way in which you get things done and changed permanently, you propose the bill, there are hearings, the American people can see it, you present your evidence, this is why it needs to happen, say, Congress, you're accountable. And then the American people can see, they can phone in.
Because the key, we harp on Congress, but it's true. They give power to the presidency of bureaucracy, just lazily passing the buck.
Yes, and then the buck is hidden, so American people don't know why. It just comes out as an executive order. The American people need to be engaged. The reason why Watergate worked, because it was public, it was transparent. Now, when there's classified information, you can have executive session. Not everything needs to be public, but the presumption needs to be transparency. And then it's the American people's government. It should be in public, and they need to know, do I need to make a phone call? Do I need to write a letter? I like it. I don't like it. I would make these suggestions. The process itself is what makes us great.
All right, Bruce Feins, our guest. We're going to be coming back with a final segment to see other key points you'd like to talk about concerning what's happening in D.C. But make no mistake, Donald Trump is a seismic earthquake to the globalist establishment. We'll be back. Coming up after Bruce leaves us, our story's up on Infowars.com and DrudgeReport.com. Video, Tent City Crisis, California. And that ties into troubled in Venice, L.A. enclave flooded with new wealth and homeless. Studio City residents furious over putrid-smelling sinkholes. Le Pen could win France, warns Hollanday. He tells Obama his main job is to defeat that. That's just some of the news. It's up on DrudgeReport.com. TSA warns. I saw this last week, and I hope it wasn't the case. TSA warns local police about new airport pat-down. Legalize groping. They're actually going to squeeze your genitals, even if you go through the body scanner. But we got to let the Muslims in. That is supposedly the cause of it. What a joke. You want to comment on that, Bruce Fein? And then let's get into your other messages to Trump. You had some more to say.
Well, I think it shows the basic de facto elimination of the Fourth Amendment, like other amendments to the Constitution. It's really quite disturbing. We have Nancy
Next,
Pelosi.
It'll be a proctology exam.
Well, not only that,
cavity search.
But if you can white out the Fourth Amendment, how about the Second Amendment? How about the First Amendment? Where do you stop?
Private property, everything.
Standard. Yeah, If you white out the treaty clause and you
You're
white
just
out,
getting rid of America.
yeah, exactly. You just get rid of it.
Because America was just more dirt, but it was about certain rules for the people.
Yeah, about standards, about the fact that we need to limit government. We need to put government in chains.
Well, how about you don't bring in radical Islam people who are 99% of the terror, and then I don't have to get my genitals grabbed.
Yeah, and moreover, how about not fighting the wars that are turning countries into wilderness so people are leaving? Yeah, if you bomb people, they don't have any houses to live in anymore. And that's what Ron Paul said. If you can march them in, you can march them out. But going to the larger point, I think even with regard to the immigration order that was new and issued today, I wonder who the White House might have suggested, hey, Mr. President, how about making this a piece of legislation like it's supposed to be done for 200 years? Not everything by executive order. You propose it to Congress.
Then it puts the onus on them.
The onus is on them. And then you can have the hearings. They vote for it. It says, you're the one, I proposed it. You're the one who decides. You take accountability if it works or doesn't work. And the American people get along. We've so accustomed to
And then it's transparent. And then the media can't lie about what his order really does, too.
Yeah, right. And then the pros and cons are there, and people can make up their own mind.
Well, I think, when the Congress tries to block him on Obamacare and stuff, he should force it to put it on them in their reelection. I get him signing an executive order telling the IRS, don't take the $5,000. Then they say, okay, we won't, maybe we will. He's trying, but we see this executive power is now even being bucked by the bureaucracy. So it's even worse than the out-of-control power of the president.
Well, but that's where you create it. It's like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? You create a limitless executive branch, then it's out of your control as well. And that's why we need to go back to procedural regularity.
And we need laws, not sorcerers.
Yeah, exactly. We need laws. And as you pointed out, go it to the Congress. They're responsible. It's got to be transparent. I mean, even like the idea that they're going to rewrite Obamacare in secret. They didn't want to hold any
Rand Paul's really doing it, banging on the door saying, give me a copy.
Yeah, I mean.
Why the hell is that secret? Why are the Republicans writing behind closed doors?
Yeah, there's no classified information. They're not talking about nuclear
That's
weapons.
one good thing Trump did was he just killed TPP. He says, not my authority. Back to Congress. Yeah. It was never there. I mean, he ought to do the same thing on Obamacare. He must say to the Republicans, what are you doing behind closed doors?
Absolutely. And why? And there ought to be a clamor. There ought to be a bill that Trump should propose that says you can't hold congressional sessions in secret unless you testify that there's a national security purpose. That is what makes the United States different. It's transparent. The reason is, how can you have governed by the consent of the governed?
If it's in secret.
Yeah, and they don't know what's going on.
Well, I mean, I'll give Trump this. He did kill TPP. He's done a lot of good things. That's why the elites are mad at him. We're not here criticizing him. We're trying to give him better advice. I mean, just imagine, like you said, Hillary would have been hitting the iceberg.
Yes, and that's what I want to underscore. Alex, this is not to give people report cards. We're all, we're frail creatures. We want to move forward together. We hang together. It's not fault finding. It's
and hey, you've gotten a ton of stuff done in D.C. I mean, on your record, I mean, your whole pedigree getting stuff done for the people has really paid off. This show probably exists because of you getting rid of the fairness doctrine. So good job. And so I think Trump and the rest of the folks and the people should hear this, and we should have a debate. We don't dumb the news down, folks. We have big, complex discussions here because, quite frankly, we're just looking for the thinkers out there that want to change the world.
And I just want to say a special tribute to Ron Paul. Ron Paul put these items on the agenda when he was out in the wilderness. We all helped supporting him set the foundation. Yes, and he's the inspiration behind this. And when he got no kudos, when he was said he's eccentric and whatever, he was not on talk shows or anything. So we need to remember it was people like him who created the American Revolution. They're the trailblazers. They found the past that we're now building roads on. And didn't need to get all the glory and all the money. And let's remember, it's not going to be, the Republic won't be rebuilt today. No. We're in, I think we've got the momentum, though. I think good things are happening. You can find his latest book, Constitution in Peril, The Life and Death Struggle for Constitution and Democracy, the American Empire for the Fall, at Amazon and many other places. Bruce Fein, thanks for coming down to Austin, Texas. Great meeting with you. Thank you, Alex. Maybe we'll have you reporting for us soon. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, we're working on a lot of stuff.